Today on Inspired Money.
Yeah, I think it's a really good case study for how you can really quickly test and validate product concepts, bring them to market super fast, and then scale.
This is episode 108 with CEO of Gravity Blanket, Mike Grillo. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. If it's your first time listening, welcome. According to a Washington Post article, if 2017 was the year of the Instant Pot, 2018 was the year to gift or get a weighted blanket. Have you heard of these? It's a duvet-like bed cover weighing from 5 to 25 pounds. The article continues, the theory is that a heavier than normal blanket hugs a sleeper and may prevent tossing and turning. As a result, the sleeper feels more secure and sleeps more soundly and for longer periods of time. Sounds pretty good, right? Today, we're talking to Mike Grillo, CEO of Gravity Blanket, the first company to bring weighted blankets to the wider consumer market. This is an inspiring story of a 2-year-old company finding success very quickly, to the tune of $16.5 million in sales in 2018. Its history is equally interesting, having been spun out of a digital publication called Futurism that leveraged its readers and 6.5 million Facebook fans to achieve one of the most successful Kickstarter campaigns of 2017. In this episode, you'll learn why digital media companies are successfully launching products to boost revenues, how to quickly test and validate product concepts, bring them to market and scale, and whether Mike thinks it's better to sell directly to the consumer online or sell through brick and mortar retailers. Now let's get inspired with Mike Grillo. Mike, welcome to Inspired Money. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me and taking the time.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
I grew up in a sort of traditional Italian American house. So money was always like a very secretive type thing. So the earliest memory I have of money is like stumbling across this like secret compartment in my mom's closet where they were like stashing cash and like other gold jewelry. And that's like, I think the most interesting and indicative like way that culture thinks about money. It's all very like, don't trust the banks, all that sort of stuff. So that's my earliest childhood memory.
Oh my gosh. It's money. Like Geraldo Rivera.
Right. Finding, what's his name? Al Capone's closet, right?
Al Capone's vault was in your mom's closet.
Essentially, near the shoes.
That is really, really cool. Well, I'm so excited to talk to you. You're a relatively young CEO, I think.
Oh my God, me? Yeah, no, I am. I'm young, on the younger side for sure.
How old are you?
I'm 32 and a half, turning 33 in January.
And Gravity Blankets has a tremendous story. I don't know if people are familiar even with what Gravity Blankets are, but really an interesting origin story, I think.
Yeah, it's a pretty atypical in that it was not like rooted from, the need for blankets specifically. I was working at a digital publisher called Futurism.com. I joined there as the COO, and we were writing at the time about, science, technology, AI, blockchain, medical devices, the future of medicine. And one of the things that our readers were gravitating towards was sort of the science of sleep, the science of mindfulness, the physiological effects that would have on the body and brain. And as we were thinking about how to monetize the business, we had a CRO whose job was to sort of pursue traditional, digital advertising. And then one of my remits as COO was to find like alternative revenue streams. And so one of the things that we had been thinking really closely about was how do we build products that we know our readers will like and sell them direct. And one of the first things we started exploring were weighted blankets, which we had noticed had existed for some time since the 90s. They'd been used in medical communities, so kids on the autism spectrum adults with sensory processing disorders, adults with post-traumatic stress. There'd been some interesting scientific research around it, but nothing in really broad populations and nothing that was really attractive or consumer facing. They were all sort of very clinical looking. So the concept was we would take the weighted blanket, redesign it, make it more utility based. So just enhance some of the features, but then also make it more design forward. And then we kickstarted it. And then that's sort of where everything began.
Did you come into this with a more media mentality? And then how does that translate into the products?
Yeah. So my specific background, I had always been in advertising and PR agencies. So the first decade of my career was all doing that. So brand building is very natural to me. From the media side of things, Futurism Media was pretty instrumental in launching the product, in that a lot of the content, the initial launch content, was coming from the Futurism channels and driving to the Kickstarter. So think about like almost an affiliate strategy, but we were owning all of the margins. So the media piece was super instrumental. And then from my background, the brand building around Gravity, it all sort of came together to this like sort of perfect storm for Kickstarter.
And it all happened super quick. Your Kickstarter, one of the most successful that I'm
Top
aware
20,
of.
I believe. Yeah.
Is it 4.6 million?
4.7 million. Yeah. We were in the top 10, I believe, and then sort of over the last couple of years have sort of dropped down into the top 20. But yeah, that happened really quickly. We were taking, the team was taking bets as to like how much we would raise, because it wasn't something we were really excited about, but didn't have any expectations for this to be like the sole monetary driver that it was. And so within the first hour, it was about 100,000, 200,000. I think we closed the first day at like almost $250,000. And then things just sort of kept going from there until we closed at 4.7 30 days later.
And that just spread like viral.
Really quickly. We made, I think, the mistake of wanting to sell it all over the globe. So we made it available worldwide. And so quickly had to start thinking about how to ship to 80 countries, a couple of them being like super unfriendly to the US. Getting goods into Russia, it was just sort of like not a thing, even though we did take a lot of orders from Russia. So there was like a lot of learnings along the way. And we actually didn't even have product at the time. So we had samples, but quickly had like 30,000 orders to fulfill in 80 countries, with a lot of people not aware that, you know, I think a lot of people outside of the Kickstarter community were drawn into it because it was the only place you could get it, but they're not familiar with the fact that Kickstarter is a place where things take quite some time to produce. You're getting in at the beginning of a product life cycle. It's not like we had these units on hand. So there were a lot of consumer expectations that were not necessarily calibrated, and a couple of very angry consumers when things didn't come within like the 2 weeks that they were expecting. So a big learning curve for sure.
Demand aside, as the sort of product developer and the brand guy, like what was your expectation for the timing from Kickstarter to getting it to market?
I think the concept was that we were going to raise $100,000 from just the Kickstarter community. And those backers tend to have an understanding that things take time. I mean, there are some projects on Kickstarter that, you know, they raised maybe 2 years ago and it's still never come to market. Of course, that was never our expectation, but we were okay with just going forward with samples, knowing that would probably take 6 months to deliver. When the audience expanded beyond Kickstarter, that's when people, I think, got confused as to like where exactly they were ordering. Like they didn't have any familiarity with the fact that Kickstarter is like much longer lead cycles, but it's like an Amazon type thing in their mind. So that was, it was something, it was a learning experience for sure. I had a couple of customers like find my mom on Facebook and like starting like writing on our family photos that her son was like a scam artist and I'd stolen their money. And so it was definitely like a whole ordeal for sure.
Well, no question, it gets bigger than you.
Yeah. It's quite large. It was interesting because we were debating, you know, we closed the Kickstarter and immediately opened up a round of pre-orders as well, because the thought was that, all right, there's so much momentum here, we have to keep going. And there was a lot of back and forth on like, should we just like stop taking orders and try to like focus on what we have, or do we keep momentum going? And it was, I think, the whole time a really delicate balance between like getting way ahead of ourselves, but also like trying to corner the market as fast as possible. And I think we struck a pretty good balance. Like we ended up fulfilling all of the orders between Kickstarter and that pre-sale within that holiday season. So we executed on it. I think it was more stressful than it had to be, but I think ultimately it was like the right decision.
I mean, the challenge is the quantity, right? Because with a smaller order, which was your expectation, like you have a little bit more time. You don't have to get it out as quick, but you have the luxury of it's not massive quantities. With massive quantities plus trying to get it out by a certain date, how do you execute that?
Yeah, there's like quality control. There's the notion that the factory we were working with, like weighted blankets as a category was not really a thing. So they weren't really being produced. They weren't like the mainstay of any manufacturing facility overseas. So we had, now we have the factory we're working with has invested in sort of machinery to help sort of scale the process faster. But at the time, everything was being hand sewn. And so obviously that has restrictions on the ability to produce at scale. And so, yeah, it was, the volume was definitely the biggest thing. Now, if we were to see that type of a demand right now, we could execute relatively quickly. I would say within, a 30 to 60 day lead time on production and we'd be on the water. Whereas at that time, it was probably closer to 4 or 5 months before we were even shipping our first units.
Well, it seems like a huge leap from like samples to production.
Literally just samples based that we made in the garment district in New York, not even from the factory that we were working with. So
now you have the experience and you have the manufacturing in place.
Yeah. Supply chain has been established for some time now, although we're working with tariffs, as you can imagine, have hit Team Gravity. And so we're thinking about like how to deal with that and what's the next move? Do we wait it out? Like assuming that they'll fall off? Do we begin to like source new supply chains? Like uprooting a supply chain is not easy, especially for a smaller company. So we're trying to be really thoughtful about how we approach the next 3 months.
Gravity Blankets seems like just a fascinating case study. Do you think that this is an example of what business kind of looks like today in the 21st century?
Yeah, I think it's a really good case study for how you can really quickly test and validate product concepts, bring them to market super fast, and then scale. I think I've always been of the mindset that if a big Fortune 100, say a CPG company wanted to, they could replicate this and then scale it 10 times faster than we could because they already have the built-in distribution channels. I'm working really hard to get in with the retailers to diversify our distribution outside of the owned and operated. But when you already have that, the product development piece should be the easiest part. And if you don't get so wed to like perfecting product and like, all this market research, all this other stuff, while I think is important, we tested Gravity by just putting up a few landing pages and seeing how quickly we could drive, how efficiently rather we could drive traffic. And that's what gave us the confidence that we could move forward. The whole thing we started the project in January. It was out by April. So I think that if, a larger scaled company could adopt this mindset, they could be tremendously successful.
Is Futurism a print product or is that online?
Digital first. So it's still around to this day, futurism.com. And then it was among that wave of publishers that was really, Facebook was the focal point of it. So I would group them with like an Attention, ATTN, smaller but similar to BuzzFeed, Now This News. So very video centric, very .com centric.
It is really cool. I mean, so many media companies are struggling because it's the ad model and you do have an audience, but it's hard to monetize the ads. So it's fascinating to see how a media company or media companies are getting or seeing the opportunity to launch products.
Yeah, I mean, we were super inspired by what BuzzFeed was doing, and they were sort of the first, definitely not the first, but like I would say the most notable like new wave publisher. They were launching these candles at the time called Homesick, and the concept was you could buy a candle that's like Connecticut themed and it would smell like Connecticut. And they were driving that exclusively through their audience. And because the audience was already built in, they wouldn't have to pay for marketing on top of it. So you essentially are bringing your cost per acquisition down to zero, at least for the first, whatever, couple months until you've exhausted your audience. And so, I think there's opportunity there. I think the hard part is like within organizations, big media organizations, how do you get buy-in from your editorial team, your biz ops team? Futurism was at the time only 7 people. So it was and I was running point on the project. So it was quite easy for me to like align interests, but it's harder in the larger like Hearsts, Condes of the world, even down to BuzzFeed is quite matrixed at this point.
So unless they look at your example and say, all right, we want to bring somebody in with some experience to launch a product and utilize our audience and how to do that,
Yeah, and I think some audiences are just not, they're really active consumers of the content, but not necessarily willing to transact. I think Futurism was a really interesting set of people that were very techie, very gadgety. And so this was just naturally fit. Whereas like, more your general interest readers aren't necessarily looking to buy things from their publishers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like a Condé Nast, if they come up with a travel pillow for the airplane, their audience may not see that as a natural fit. They'd be like, this feels weird.
Yeah, they'll certainly buy one, but maybe not from, GQ. I don't know. Maybe they would.
So it's really interesting because you've got audience first rather than product first.
Yeah, that was the super interesting piece, but it's just not all that dissimilar to how you always want to look at like the potential customers and what like need states they're in. And so this was perfect in that it was obviously a very gadgety group of individuals, but also around the time where like we had just come off the 16 elections. There was like a lot of anxiety in general. We were, obviously a millennial first publication, and that generation is struggling with a lot of issues, but also very like mental health forward in terms of like their ability to discuss mental health. And so the fact that Gravity is a sleep and anxiety / relaxation brand, I think really resonated both from an audience standpoint, a timing standpoint, and then just the general like societal state of affairs.
You talked about the importance of testing different products with an audience. Yeah. What did that process look like? Because the weighted blankets were not the only or the first idea.
Yeah, sure. We were testing a bunch of stuff. We were testing silver infused socks. We were testing the weighted blanket. There were a couple of other like more kitschy items. And that's the weighted blankets were the one that like popped up. Since then, we sort of have adopted that same approach though to the like additional Gravity products. So when we roll out like a non-core blanket product, we do the same type of testing. We'll develop a landing page. We'll like drive traffic to it, see how like efficiently we could acquire either an email submission or even a purchase to some extent. We won't actually collect money because there's no product yet, but that's how we sort of gauge. That's the last step that gives us the confidence before we know to go forward with product development.
So you get analytics, you see numbers.
Depending on what exactly the goal is, we're looking mostly for cost per acquisition because we're obviously direct to consumer. That's how we're acquiring most of our customers is on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. So if we can keep our CPAs within like a third of the MSRP, we feel pretty strongly that we can get drive traction when the product actually is live.
And that's changing over time because Gravity Blankets is not the only manufacturer of weighted blankets, but you guys did create the category, I think, as a broader consumer product.
It's when people ask about competitors, I always say there's not like a big one that I think of. There's more 1,000 smaller players that are capitalizing on the category. So I think it's always been on us to like, what is our moat? And we get that a lot. And I don't know if that's a super fair question because I think you could ask that about Nike. Like there's a million shoe companies, but I think our moat is brand. We are a health wellness, millennial centric company. But the other thing is we're very focused on not building just a weighted blanket business, but a broader sleep business. So our weighted eye mask is going to be in probably over 600,000 homes this year. We just are executing a huge order right now. That's our second bestseller. There's a patent against it. We have a pillow that we just launched that has aromatherapy components, again, patent pending. So we're really trying to build out this sort of like, think about it like the 5 sense strategy. So we have your blanket for touch, your pillow for, smell, the eye mask for sight. So we're working across sort of, that's the broader strategy.
And you guys have gel tablets too.
We do. We have CBD plus melatonin gel caps that are doing really well. We're waiting on some of the regulation to loosen up the government's perspective on it is sort of unclear. It's very state by state. So it's been hard to scale that business. But it's definitely sort of when things loosen up, we're really well positioned to keep going.
As you guys have diversified into additional product lines, the launch is not the same process, right? You're not going to Kickstarter and doing it the same way. It's changed.
We love Kickstarter and it obviously made us who we are. I don't think I'd ever kickstart again. I think the audience expectations there are very different than I would rather sort of like pre-sale on our .com with full transparency that we're not going to be ready to deliver for 3 months than kickstart again. There's also obviously the risk that when you're kickstarting, everyone sees how much money you've raised. And so you run the risk of like, oh, wow, if this is a flop, there's a lot of external attention. Oh, Gravity's flopping, right? As opposed to if it's on our owned and operated, we can control the narrative more. Although we, knock on wood, haven't flopped quite yet, but always something to think about.
And it's not just direct consumer. That's part of the evolution as well. You're trying to go beyond that.
Yeah, I think we're way past the point where you could build a scaled business direct to consumer off Facebook and Instagram. It's too dangerous, I think, to like put all of your eggs in that basket, especially because, the platform's priorities are changing. It's easier than ever to get into product dev. So competition is way fiercer. I think we might have been among the last wave of companies that really could scale direct to consumer. But even still, we're seeing like increased competition there, rising CPAs. So really thinking about omnichannels the way I've been building the business last year. So we are in store with Bloomingdale's, online with Target and Macy's and Bed Bath, and in store with a couple of other partners. We're looking at like much broader brick and mortar presences in 2020 and beyond. So yeah, really, really working that. And then partnerships as well. We collabo with Calm, the meditation app, on a blanket that comes with a bundled subscription. We work with 8 Sleep on a custom product. We're working on something super interesting right now with a really, really large mattress manufacturer. So that's sort of, again, how we're looking to scale. Super diverse, like any investment portfolio.
Coming up, we talk about why Gravity Blanket was spun out, Mike's previous work experiences that helped prepare him to be an effective CEO. All that and more right after this short break. The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/108. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. I love the idea this week of validating a product before fully producing it. Gravity Blanket is a stellar example of this, but it reminds me of things that Johnny Nastor talked about in Inspired Money episode 106. He talked about the importance of his audience and having the ability to figure out what products or services might suit his audience. So think about that. With Futurism, the media company has a big audience of readers of its publication. In Johnny's case, he has an audience of podcast listeners. Some entrepreneurs may have an email list. Whatever the form, the audience matters. Not only to try to raise money, but the platform provides a way to validate your idea just by the way it functions. If you hit your fundraising goal, that means you validated your idea. Falls short, and your idea did not fly. The importance of validating your idea up front is that it can save you a lot of time and frustration. It's a little counterintuitive. Let's dig a little deeper. Number one, you have to share your idea. There's an inclination for entrepreneurs to keep their idea secret in fear that someone else will run with it first. The lesson that we're hearing today is that while that may be a risk, the value of validating your idea is even greater. 2, find an idea that already exists. You may remember that Johnny Nastor talked about this. He does not want a product that does not exist at all yet. That brings a lot of uncertainty. Starting with a product or service that exists already is another way of validation because you already know that there's a market for it. There's interest in that. From there, if you take it and you make improvements to it, you tweak it, you make it a little bit different, now you just have to prove, can you market your product and will people buy it? 3, don't start by building the product. Start by making a prototype, a sample, a mini version that can be mocked up quickly. Mike talked about the sample versions that they had when they launched the Gravity Blanket Kickstarter. And last is number 4, sell before you produce. This can mean pre-selling a course to see if there's interest. Again, Johnny talked about doing this with software. If you can sell only 5 to 10 copies at the start, you can ask for feedback among users and improve from version 1.0 to build version 2.0. Keep marketing the improved versions, and hopefully over time, you'll start to scale. Using these techniques are easier to accomplish today because of technology, so consider trying it. Whether you're crowdfunding or using the old-fashioned survey, Validate your idea before diving in head first. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. What's your biggest financial challenge right now? Do you have a money question? If you need help, go to inspiredmoney.fm/Andy to email me, or schedule a 15-minute call at inspiredmoney.fm/15. I'd love to chat with you. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong. What are your views on how retail operates now? Because it's not a case where you're going direct to consumer and that you're advocating that there has been a paradigm shift and you can eliminate the middleman. You don't need retail spaces that are physically there for customers to go touch and see the product.
Yeah. That to me is like super, especially when you're dealing with an experiential product like Gravity that most people have not tried a weighted blanket before, even though the category it seems very ubiquitous. I would say 75 to 80% of people still have not tried one. So being physically able to be seen and touched and felt is super important for a product like Gravity. But then on the other side of it, I think retail in general, like 90% of shopping still happens in store. And Amazon controls most of the rest. And playing the Amazon game is like a necessary evil, but I don't think anyone there is winning except Amazon. If they want to make their own white label product, they're going to make it and just eat you. So while we're there, it's not all eggs in any one basket.
So right now you're available on Amazon, totally. But also through brick and mortar.
Yep. Amazon, any place you can shop, maybe not like, any like shopping method, you can purchase a Gravity blanket in some capacity.
It's really been surprising to see weighted blankets. I mean, in just broad consumer space, right? You guys were the first, so they haven't been around that long, but I feel like so many people
they're everywhere now, right?
Know about them. Yeah.
Yeah. We enjoy sort of what I would call like the Band-Aid effect, wherein like, even if you're not talking about our product, you're referring to it as a Gravity blanket. So like a Kleenex, a Band-Aid, which is really great in that like that is a lot of free marketing. At the same time, it's also drives a lot of volume for competition, So like our search term is very heavily bid against Gravity blanket. When you look at search index, like Gravity blanket and weighted blanket tend to be sort of similar in terms of search volume. So it's just an interesting problem to have. It's definitely a blessing, but at the same time, we are feeding a lot of other people off the brand name.
That's a compliment to your branding because I think that's you.
Well, yeah, it was a team effort for sure. But yes, we're very proud of the brand.
So given your experience running this company, so you left Futurism as COO because this took off.
Yeah. We spun out it just made sense to run it as a separate business. And so to let both businesses like realize their true potential, because otherwise everything was sort of, we were sharing a lot of the same resources, like the creative teams were overlapping and neither was really benefiting from like the true power of each brand. So yeah.
If someone has a product idea, what is your advice to them given your experience in launching successful products, even though you had a unique opportunity because you had this Futurism audience first? Do you advise people like you've got to build an audience?
There's a way where you can assess demand before you go into anything, right? Obviously, like checking ideas off other people is cool, but you could throw up a landing page and collect email submissions for your concept really easily. And not only does that let you gauge demand, but it also lets you build up your email list, which is like sort of the biggest thing, right? If you can have that, you upload it into Facebook, you get first party lookalike audiences off the back of that. So that's the key. But as long as you're developing like sort of soft goods, or like non-hardware centric stuff, it's really easy to make a product right now. It's like almost product development has become more of a marketing function than an actual product development function. And I think you even are seeing it now, like a lot of the big companies out there are having CEOs that have come from more of a marketing acumen than like sort of a biz ops or finance acumen. I was reading somewhere that like only 5% of retail CEOs have any type of marketing background, but that's been changing dramatically over time because retail is such a marketing centric game. It definitely is logistical centric too, but brand is always going to be first in a world where there's so much choice, right?
I'm surprised by those numbers because just when you think about a Nike or something, even Under Armour, it's so powerful, the brand.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this article was specifically related to Kohl's, who their new CEO comes from like a marketing acumen. But I think it does hold true. Like, brand is really all you have unless you're a like tech company with like real secret sauce. Like 90% of products out there can be white labeled or knocked off. I mean, you see it all the time. So it always does crack me up when people are like, "Oh, what's your moat? What's your moat?" Like, very few companies have a true moat, I would say, in like a traditional sense of the word.
That's what I want to know. The flip side of that, because of the ease to bring a new product to market, and it is about building the brand and the marketing, how do you protect your company so that there is a moat?
Yeah, we're really, really aggressive. Maybe not aggressive is not the right word. Very protective of the brand. So we probably spend more on legal than a company of our size should, because we're policing the brand name, policing anything we can about like the all products we've developed and the IP around that. So yeah, definitely like a strong IP protection team, but then also just trying to keep like pushing and like not getting lazy about the brand itself. Like, what is the next iteration of the brand all the time, updating it, like thinking about it constantly. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of brands do go wrong, and that they don't think about the brand like as deeply as they should be. I think they'll establish the brand guidelines and then away they go. Whereas like it's a living, breathing thing that needs to be like the brand pyramid that we made 2 years ago is very different from what like the cores are the same, but the attributes are different. The characteristics are different. The way we talk has evolved over time. I just thinking being really religious about that is important.
Given the quick success of the company, right? When you graph like your initial sales, it was like, I don't know. I'm thinking that it's parabolic from lower left to upper right. How do you protect against that fast success so that it's not a short term, just a flash?
We didn't raise any venture, which is good, because I think the inclination probably would be to, all right, you have this success, like now go raise $20 million off of it from a VC and get like a, whatever, $100 million valuation or something like that. I think that is I think there's something wrong with that, but I guess like broadly, there's nothing really wrong with that, except that you've now put yourself in a position where you have to make a lot of really short-term decisions to try to get a return for your investors. Whereas we're not. I mean, of course we want to keep growing, and we are growing. But there's not this expectation that we're going to grow at 100% year over year because we've taken $30 million, I think just tempering the expectations of, if you have investors, what are their expectations, and then making decisions accordingly.
You've had the sort of luxury and privilege of having one successful product that's generating enough revenue so that you can reinvest some of that and develop a broader product line.
The good news is soft goods are like not super R&D intensive. It's not like we're developing electronics where there's, really exponential R&D costs. But yeah, we're trying to roll out 2 new products a quarter, maybe 3 per half. And those can be as simple as like, new artist collaborations on our like duvet covers, or as like discreet as like the eye mask. So trying to mix, like diversify the type of products we're making while also giving expanded choice for the core line. So new sizes, new weights, new colors, new patterns, new prints, because that is also a way to grow by just expanding the SKUs on the core.
What does the testing process look like when you're considering new products to include?
Fully new products will do sort of the same type of like, we have a community of like a small percentage of our customers that we give access to. They test all of our new products. Then we'll do our landing page tests to validate like the broader appeal. If it's just sort of changes to the line, like the core line, we'll often like put up an Instagram poll, like, what colors do you want from us in the new year? Simple stuff like that. Those are easier to roll out because there's such an established base, and we get a lot of customer feedback on like, people have been wanting a queen blanket for over a year now. We've been really hesitant because it's expensive to ship. It's a 35-pound unit, so it's like pretty pricey, but it was so clear that the demand was there that it was a no-brainer for us. We didn't really like do any formal testing on it. We just sort of endeavored to make it and then rolled it out.
I did read one of the reviews that somebody wrote, and they were like, "Oh, we had I don't remember which publication it was, but the writer was saying that, we had a test product in the office. She couldn't take it home because taking it out of the office home to Brooklyn was just going to be too hard in the subway.
I believe we ended up shipping them another one to their apartment just because there was like trouble transporting it back and forth.
Yeah, even my son, who's 9 and has some trouble sleeping, we got him a gravity blanket and it seems to work. I mean, it works like a charm. I don't know about the science, but he seems to sleep better.
We did. So I will say, so there was definitely some like preliminary scientific research out there. No one's really endeavored to do like a large scale study. We did commission our own study that published in March, 1,000 nights of sleep across 50 participants. Or maybe 100. I'd have to check the thing. But we studied it across qualitative and quant, so sleep tracking metrics, efficacy, latency, as well as self-reported. Results came back really, really strong. And I think that is something we're also proud of, is that we're the only brand that has invested in research, as opposed to just like a lot of folks are making really, I mean, I come from, my first job was in pharma marketing, so I'm like super sensitive about what we're saying in terms of treats versus cures versus, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff on what you can and can't say. But
I understand those sensitivities.
Yeah. We want to be really careful, and I am proud of the fact that we've commissioned research on it that we can stand behind.
Can you talk a little bit about your previous work experiences and how that prepared you for your role as CEO?
Yeah, for sure. My first job was I did crisis communications for large cap pharma. So I went to Switzerland with Novartis and worked on like their issues and risk communications and some like investor relations stuff. And I think that working in crisis comms is super formative in that it's tremendously high pressure. Everything, even if it's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, is a super big deal to the client. Thinking about how to position, thinking what the CEO's message is, thinking who's speaking on behalf of the brand. I think even though that was so long ago, was some of the first memories I have on like the importance of reputation and the importance of brand, the importance of communicating on topics. We've had a few like quote unquote crises at Gravity. We always try to get out ahead of them, like never like a no comment approach, always trying to both speak directly to our audience via our channels and then also speak to our press partners. So that was definitely, I think, to me, the most important like work experience I've had, even though it was sort of the first work experience I had.
Yeah, you understand that when there's a problem, how to handle it well.
There's also an opportunity when you have a problem. Every crisis is an opportunity.
And then you were at VaynerMedia as well?
Yeah, I was at Gary's agency for 4 years, I think. I was early on there, maybe like the 50th employee. By the time I left, he had scaled the business to like almost 600, 700, and I believe they're almost 1,000 now. So he has quite a business. But that was cool too, to watch like a company grow really quickly. Agencies and service industry stuff need, like by the nature of it, need a lot of people. Gravity probably is doing more revenue now than what Vayner was doing when I joined, and we have a third of the people. It's intrinsically a different business. So we don't imagine getting anywhere near that. Like I could see us being like 40 people tops at like our peak.
Where are you now?
We're at 15.
So you still have a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, there's room to grow. Yeah, we don't ever want to be a like a 600. It's for me, that's not something that I'm interested in, is running a company that large from a people standpoint. Of course, I'd love to have Gary's revenue, but in terms of his workforce size, not what I'm interested in.
Are there a lot of entrepreneurs that come out of his agency? I was just curious. I don't know.
I don't know. I can't say for sure. I don't want to say I'm the only one. Everyone's very entrepreneurial minded for sure. I'm struggling to like think of someone else, but yeah, there's definitely like anyone that's at that agency, or at least was at the time, was there to have that entrepreneurial vibe and have more control over their work than they would working in a more traditional environment, for sure.
Yeah, I was just curious, since that's like his DNA, if that sort of is like an incubator to get, right? Because if he's hiring people,
he should charge a royalty.
Exactly.
Right?
He thinks so. So what do you see for the future of your company? It sounds like you're diversifying your product lines. Yeah. Specifically, you are trying to stay in, it is wellness, but you're trying to stay in the sleep area.
We ran a brand survey recently, like what are the 3 things you associate with Gravity? sleep, stress reduction, anxiety reduction, and people associate it with sort of sleep and anxiety. They think of, nighttime anxiety and then ability to go to sleep. So we'll stay firmly within that. But I think the sky's the limit in terms of we have a digital course out on anxiety management. And I'd love to do more stuff like that. It's just a matter of like, where do we prioritize it in the grand scheme of the product rollout? Do we need more people to sort of activate against that? But yeah, I think digital content's really interesting. I think more mixed retail. So, spaces where Gravity is both selling, obviously our product, but also selling some type of a relaxation service, I think is really interesting to me. More collaborations. I think there's a lot. We don't really want to ever be in the style game. So we would want to bring in like designers or artist collaborators to help us sort of get that piece of the business out. Cause I think I'm not particularly style driven myself. So I wouldn't trust myself like driving that part of a business forward, but we can get there with collaborations. So yeah, I'm thinking super broadly and taking any meeting I can in terms of I'm open to a million different ideas, and just trying to like call down the ones that make the most sense.
You mentioned the weight of the blankets and shipping. Yeah. What's happening in international markets?
It's messy. So yeah, the tariffs are really a thing. Our sleep mask was hit with a 25% lift in tariff on September 1, and that will go into effect on all weighted blankets in December. So we have a lot of thinking to do. Like, do we move supply chain to Vietnam? Do we try to source something stateside? And we've tried. Stateside manufacturing is really not an option. It's just, I think you'd still end up paying, it'd still be cheaper to go overseas. And not that I wouldn't want to do something in America, but the expectation now for the category is that it needs to sit under $200, $250 and under. And I think if we were to go stateside to enjoy the margin that we have, which is really just to keep our bit, like we're running a true business. A lot of the other players out there are just sort of 2 or 3 people that are buying direct and selling it on Amazon. For us to like do R&D, to have an office, to have a team, it's not like we're being greedy with our margin, but we can't afford to move manufacturing stateside, keep our price point, and do all the things that we want to do. So lots of factors at play.
Can you sell into the international markets?
Yes, we are doing. Sorry, that's part of what you were getting at from the jump. We are global. We are on Amazon in the UK, Italy, France, Germany, Spain, which we're really excited about. We'll hit some brick and mortar in the UK in this holiday season. We're already in Canada. Canada's been a big market for us from the jump. We are exclusive with a retailer called Indigo there. They are a sort of high-end home goods / bookstore. Think about them as like an elevated Barnes & Noble meets CB2. They're great partners of ours. Thinking a lot about Latin America. Mexico is a big market. And then also Asia, Japan has been really interesting for us. Strangely enough, I've asked our manufacturing partners about China for some time, and they, despite making all of the world's weighted blankets, say that there's not much demand from a consumer standpoint. So we would probably do something in South Korea or Japan before we did China. So yeah, we're trying to go as broadly as possible.
Yeah, that's a clear theme for you. It's distribution through partnerships, different areas, different products.
Gaining as much ground as we can, as early as we can, I think is the strategy. Like there's something to be said about being really measured, but then you have to balance that with like someone's going to get there first. And the sooner we can be somewhere, the more sort of protection we have.
Is that the biggest pressure that you guys put on yourselves as a company? Like what kind of things keep you up at night?
That someone's moving faster than we are. I saw a competitor in Sam's Club, and I'm sort of mad that I didn't get there first. But at the same time, you can't do everything all at once. We've been, we're a small team. So do we go really hard on trying to get distribution? Do we double down on R&D and try to do more products? There's only a finite number of things that can be done. So yeah, speed, when I miss out on an interesting collaboration, I'm mad about that, but then I'd be equally mad if I didn't get to a retailer first. So just trying to move fast across as many facets of the business as possible.
It's a moving target, right? You're constantly trying to figure out your priorities.
Yes, and readjusting them for sure.
Well, thank you for sharing your very inspiring story of coming up with this product company, born out of a media company.
Yeah, super weird, but
and moving super fast. I mean, it's really exciting. I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
How do I define success? I think I just want to continue. For me, wellness is a space that I want to be in, and mental health is something I'm super passionate about. So as long as I can keep growing both my influence in that space and my company's influence in that space, I think that's successful to me.
And I noticed something, I can't find it now, but I saw it was your Twitter description.
What do I have? What do I say on there? Oh, I don't want to be rich. I want to be somebody. That's a P. Diddy quote, by the way. Yeah, I mean, of course, everyone wants like some sort of financial windfall, but for me, I'd rather be known as contributing to the broader wellness and mental health conversation than having a huge financial windfall.
So you really want to make an impact.
Yeah, we do a lot of charity stuff at Gravity. We don't really talk about that as much because I think it comes off super inauthentic. We gave $100,000 to mental health research last year, which is actually way more than my finance team was hoping that we'd give. We're a partner with the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation. They're the largest sort of nonprofit for mental health research as it pertains to the brain. So we do that stuff all the time. We're really excited about it. We just don't do a lot of talking about it.
When you do more than your finance team really wanted you to do, is that coming from you?
Well, yes, partly. We did a matching program and I sort of underestimated exactly how many units we'd sell, but it was really cool to say that we've given $100,000 to charity since we've launched, we've given over $150,000 to charity, which is great for a company of 15 people. That means a lot to me. And so I think it's an important part of the brand. And frankly, like you can make the argument that it's like doing good for the community, but also great for the brand as well. So that's how I try to sell it to them. But they're all very altruistic people themselves, so they weren't too upset.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. I mean, very much part of the Inspired Money podcast is making an impact and trying to make the world a better place. Can you share with the Inspired Money listener where they can learn more about your company and your products and find you?
Yes, everything is Gravity Blankets. So we're at www.gravityblankets.com, at Gravity Blankets on Instagram, at Gravity Blankets on Twitter. And then you can find me, a personal plug, at Mike Grill's Made It on Instagram, MikeGrillz made it.
I don't think it should be past tense, making it.
Oh my God, I love that.
But they'll find
grammar,
you.
Giving you grammar.
They'll find you.
They will find me, yeah.
Mike Grillo made it.
Yes.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I love the idea of validating, testing, and scaling a product idea. Going a step further, I like what Mike said about the ease of creating a product today. While it's difficult to stop copycats, he emphasized the importance of building a strong brand and protecting your brand as best you can. Thanks for joining me on this mission today. Are you in the Inspired Money Makers Facebook group yet? If not, join us at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. If you like the episode, please let me know. Post in the Facebook group or tweet me at RunnyMeadCap. That's RUNNYMEDECAP. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.